All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. We've been talking databases, and we're back to our text, or one of the texts we're going to go over, which is the SQL book by Opal. Go back and show you it. It's SQL Beginner's Guide, 3rd edition. All right, and we are up to Chapter 8. And remember, I'm going to go through about the first 12 or so chapters of this textbook. And we're up to Chapter 8, Modifying SQL Data. As you can see, there are 3 basic objectives in this chapter. Insert SQL data, update SQL data, and delete SQL data. Now in the last chapter, Chapter 7 was on the select statement. And as mentioned at that time, what you cannot do with a select statement is change data. What you can do with any of these 3 statements is you can change data. And as mentioned last time also, that the select, insert, update, and delete statements represent the SQL DML, or data manipulation language statements. All right. Earlier we had talked about some of the DDL, or data definition language statements, those being create, alter, and drop, which were typically used with the schema, not the data. Now we're going to be working with the data, and as it says here, one of the primary functions of any database is to be able to manipulate the data stored within its tables. Designated users must be able to insert, update, and delete data as necessary. So that's what this chapter is. It discusses each one of these 3 things. So let's get right to it. And here is the syntax. All right. But let's actually get in and let's add a new employee. All right. So remember, if we select star from employees, we currently have 10 people. I'm going to make a new mythical employee that I'm going to put in. So I'm going to insert into employees. Now when you do this, you've got 2 ways that you can do it. All right. I can say here values and just start putting in stuff, or I can say values and actually put in what the field names are, since it's a little easier to do it this way. All right, so I'm going to put in here no. So that should make the ID number 11. Let's put in something that'll make it very easy to recognize this new employee. 888-88-8888. So that'll be the new employee's social security number. Their name will be, let's put Charles in. So Charles, that will be the first name, the middle initial, how about C? And the last name will be Corrigan. All right. The address will be 751 Parr Road. The zip will be 63385. And let's make Charles, I don't know, let's have him be in Department 4. All right. When it says 1 row affected, that's a good thing. So please remember, this is the way our table currently exists. All right. So now let's come back in here and select star, and you notice we now have an 11th employee. Automatically put in the number for us. There's the social security number, first name, middle initial, last name, address, zip, and department number. So looking at this, we have the word insert, which says that we are going to add something new. We are inserting into, so where are we going to insert it? Into the employees table. And the values that we're going to put in, inside of parentheses, null representing the ID number, 888-88-8888 representing the social security number, Charles for the first name, C for the middle initial, Corrigan for the last name, 751 Parr Road for the address, 63385 for the zip, and 4 for the department number. Well, let's do one more thing. Okay, let's select star from departments. And we see our departments. So let's insert into departments values, and let's put a new one in there. So we'll put in here null. I think we set that up as a primary key, and if we didn't, we're going to have to change it. So if I get an error message, you'll know why. All right, it says one row affected. So let's see if we put a new department in there. And there it is, networking. All right, so now if we wanted, we could add another employee and make that employee a networker as an example. All right, so let's take a look. So how to, in fact, we'll do the modifying in just a minute. How's that? So we just inserted SQL data. All right, so I showed you all that was actually required was to do an insert into the table name values and then the values. All right. Most SQL implementations support inserts into views. However, there may be restrictions. For example, you cannot insert into a view if there are table columns that are included in the view. Well, bottom line is this. One of the most important things is if you want to insert inside of a table, if you want to be able to add records, back in chapter 6 or 5 or wherever it was, we looked at the SQL security mechanism, and you have to have permissions to be able to add data. Again, typically if I go into a bank and they say, "Can I help you?" and I said, "Yes, I want to open up a new account." Well, they're not. The bank teller is not going to do that for you. The bank teller will say, "Just a minute, sir. I will get a personal banker to help you," because they don't have the authority to do that. In much the same way, quite often what you have is you might have a person who does not have the authority to actually insert new data. They may have the authority to look at data, to do a select, but they may not have the authority to insert and or update and or delete data. All right. So the author mentions a couple things here. In the third line of the syntax, with the value clause, you must specify one or more values to be inserted into the table. These values must meet certain requirements. If the column names are not specified, then there must, just like I did, there must be a value for each column. If they are specified, there must be exactly one value per column. You must provide a value for each column except for columns that allow for nulls or have a default. Each value with a character must be, character string type, varchar, char, etc., must be enclosed within single quotes. You may use the keyword null, and you already saw that. I used that for the primary key. All right. Many SQL programmers prefer to specify the column names whether or not it's necessary to do so. So I could have done this. All right. So this is the way I did it. Insert into the table name values plus the values. But you don't have to do it that way. I think it's easier to do it that way, which is the reason that I did do it the way that I did. All right, if you want more on that, and I think I've mentioned this before, but I do want to say it again, it never hurts. That is, you go out to dev.mysql.com. That's the SQL site. So even though it shows the HTTP, you can put that in, but of course you don't have to. All right, so if you go out to here, that's where all the magic happens, so to speak. When almost always when I go to look for something, that's my starting or jumping off point. All right. You're also able, if you want to load your own copy of MySQL, you can do that from here. But one of the biggest things is in here someplace, and I don't know where it is the reference guide. All right. Documentation. There you go. MySQL reference manual. So this is, and it looks like 5.7 is the newest version that they have up and running. This literally is probably hundreds of pages long. So if I wanted to know more about anything, anything that I've been going over, or even a tutorial to get started, all right, examples of common queries, all right. Some of this stuff we have talked about or will talk about in the future. All right, don't want to waste too much time on that, so let's jump back in. There are a lot of examples in here. I've already given you a couple. And again, I'm using the examples that I think are easiest to work with. Again, you may or may not agree. Notice on page 180, if you try to execute an insert statement that omits a column that does not permit null values, you'll receive an error. So in the example that I gave here, if, for example, I had to put null in networking the way I wrote it, null for the department number and networking for the department name. If I try to insert into this again, and all I said was null, notice I get an error message. Column count doesn't match the value count at row 1 because the count is 1, 2, and I only put 1 in. All right. Now, what's kind of important right here is notice that you get an error number, and that error number is 1136. It's kind of important just because of the fact that if you want to, all right, you can always go back through the MySQL documentation that I just showed you, or you can just Google MySQL error number 1136. But a lot of times what it's going to show you is either a Stack Overflow, or if you look long enough, here's the MySQL.com forums. All right. And they will give you some kind of an explanation of what's going on. A lot of times the error it'll pretty much make sense based on the description that you're given. There are a few generic or general type of errors that are occasionally given in MySQL. Those are a little harder to work your way through, or can be a little harder. All right, bottom of page 180, inserting values from a select statement. Earlier in this chapter, I said that the values clause is mandatory. There is, however, an alternative to the values clause. You can use a select statement if you want to do that. To specify the values you want to insert into the table. The key to using a select statement is to make sure that the number of values returned by the select statement matches the required number of values and you basically adhere to any restrictions. All right. So it says, suppose that in addition to this CD table, there's a second table that includes these two columns. So then you could do this. So for lack of better words, if I'm going to copy something from one table into another, this is a quick way of doing it. Or maybe I've got two tables that, so let's suppose, for example, that I'm creating a list of tables that, I create in a table a list of records of people who work at Acme Widget Company. And so is Charles. He's doing the same thing. And I'm going from A to Z. He's going from Z to A. All right, for whatever reason, we just decided to do it that way. And we're both about half done. So we have no repetition right now. So we could take his, for example, his table and say insert into my table, select all those names from his table. And it would be a way of combining the two tables together. Now it's a little confusing here. If we look on page 181, because I don't like to skip things in here, but the author mentions a column in one table does not have to be the same data type as a column in another table to be copied, as long as the values inserted refer to the data restrictions of the table. Usually that deals with working with, for example, you might have something is a number type which contains a decimal, and you want to insert, as an example, you want to insert into that particular column a value that's an int. All right, not a problem doing that. All right, let's jump up to updates. Some people find updates a little bit confusing. All right, most don't. Update followed by the table name, set followed by the, whatever it is you want to change, where followed by the search condition. Now, this is a really important one. Okay, because what I want to do here, let's select star from employees again. Remember, we just recently added Charles. Well, we want Charles to be in Department 6 because he's a networking person. So I say update, followed by the name of the table, which is employees. And I can put all this on one line. I'm putting it on several lines, so just to break it up so you can see what's happening. Set, and what I want to set is department number. And again, even though I'm using this caseness, any caseness would work. I want to set it equal to 6. Now, if I hit this, I'm not going to do that because if I hit this and hit enter, that'll change every employee's department number to 6. I don't want to do that. So virtually 100% of the time when you do an update statement, just like a delete statement that we'll look at next, but virtually 100% of the time when you do this, you will end up putting a where condition in here. So where, and I could pick any of these. I could say where first name equals Charles, where address equals this, but sometimes you're going to have repeating stuff in here. So typically I would grab the things that don't repeat. So I would use ID. That's always a good thing to use as the primary key. Or in this case, since this is unique, I could use social security number. But what I'm going to just say is where ID equals 11. Oops, 11. When it says 1 changed, all right, that's a good thing. And I have no warnings. So let's go back and let's run this again. And notice that Charles was working for Department 4. He's now in Department 6. All right. So the big thing with update, it's update followed by the table name, set followed by the field you want to set, and you can have multiple fields. So I could have said, for example, let's say that I found out that Charles' middle initial was not C. I could have said set department number equals 6, comma, MI equals R, for example, where ID equal 11. And the key thing here, the key takeaway is too, when you work on this, virtually always have a where statement. As mentioned, had I not put the where in here, that would have changed everyone's department number, everyone's, to 6. So it's very rare, if ever, that you're going to want to do that. So as the author says here on the top of page 183, as you can see, the update and the set are required, where the where is, so update and set are required, where is optional, but as I mentioned, you'll almost always want to use the where statement. All right. SQL supports view names and updates. However, if the view is based on multiple tables, there may be other restrictions. All right. So there's their example. Update their inventory, set in stock to 27. So again, the problem with that one is that's going to set the in stock for everything in there to 27. So they also showed how to do this and put in a where statement, just as I've already shown you. Again, without using the where, as they mentioned on the bottom of page 183, it will change every single record in the table. So the where clause allows you to specify more than one predicate, so you can use and, you can use or, you can use whatever you may need to use. Also, just like with the insert statement, you can update values using a select statement. All right. What's nice about doing that is you can run the select statement first, to make sure, remember the select statement cannot change the value of data. So you can run the select statement first to make sure you're doing what you want to do, or you're about to manipulate what you want to manipulate. And then you can run an update statement on that. All right, and the last thing that's discussed in here, starting on the bottom of 186, is deleting SQL data. And before we do that, let's put in a mythical, because the one table we haven't worked with yet. So let's select star from zip city state. All right, and let's describe zip city state. All right, so we've got this. I'm going to put in a bogus zip city state. So I'm going to insert into zip city state values. And I could put all this on one line. I like to separate it so I can really see what's going on here. So we'll put in null, and we'll put in, for a zip, I'm just making one up, 5555. In fact, I'll use the one from where I'm actually, my wife, too long a story. And we'll put in here Rockton, Illinois, and that's where I used to live before I took this position. All right, so I've got my 4 fields. I get my 1 row affected. That's good. I describe it. No, let's select star. And there it is. Now, I want to show you 2 things. The first thing is I don't want that anymore. So I'm going to say delete from zip city state. Now, again, if I hit enter here, everything is gone. All of my data will be gone. So virtually 100% of the time, unless that's my intention, I will put a where statement in here. So where, and again, I'm going to say here, I can say ID equal 5, or I could say zip equals 61072, or I could say city equal Rockton, or I could say, in this case, state equal Illinois. Now, again, when you're working with this stuff, always to be sure, I recommend always basing it off of the primary key field. So I'm going to say where ID equal 5. All right, 1 row affected, and notice that it's gone. Now I want to show you one more thing which you may or may not realize. I'm going to add that record back again. So insert into this, values, and it's back. But notice when I run the select statement, notice what the ID is. Notice how it's 6. Once I remove that record, that particular ID will not be, I will not be able to use that again. All right? The way that I've got this set up with auto increment. And it's done more as a preventive type of measure because this is auto incremented. I already had an ID of 5. All right? And think of it this way. If I've got an employee who works for a company and they've got an employee number, and let's just assume I shouldn't use that as an ID field, but let's assume that I did. All right? Once they're let go, fired, retire, whatever, we're saying that we're not going to give that ID number to anyone else. So I just showed you most of the stuff. It's pretty simple. Delete from the table name where search condition. Again, the where is optional, but just like with the with the update, when you do that, if you don't put a where in there, it's going to remove everything. That's pretty much all there is to that. The rest of the chapter, they give an example in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop lecturing right now. And in the next chapter, chapter 9, we will be going over using predicates, which will allow us to compare SQL data, return nulls, return similar values, reference additional sources of data, and quantify comparison predicates. So I'll be back with that lecture shortly.